Welcome to Second Take, the show that focuses on the issues behind the news. Finance Minister Pravin Gordhan delivered his third budget on Wednesday. Terence Creamer joins me to discuss some of the highlights, especially for the productive sectors of the economy. Terence, welcome to Second Take. Was the minister able to build on the infrastructure theme that President Jacob Zuma unveiled in his State of the Nation address?
Yes, that was a big theme of the budget, and I think it was underpinned by two other mega or macro themes in this year's budget. And the one was the big theme of that the government finances are in a very healthy position, but growth is in a very unhealthy position. So what we saw, I think, was surprising at how good the government finances are. If you juxtapose that against what's happening in the rest of the world, particularly in Europe, where we see deficits and debt rates really out of control, the fact that we are having our deficit to GDP percentage coming down to 4.8% for last year, or this current year, and really moderating much more quickly than was expected, all the way down to 3% by 2015, from much higher levels that were predicted in the mini budget in October, 5.5%, moderated back or cut back to 4.8%, and coming down to the 4%, 3% levels quite quickly. I think that shows a very healthy management of the finances. On the other hand, a very poor story on the growth outlook, 2.7% for the year that we're currently in, for last year, and not really breaching that 4% level for some time. We were expecting to get to that 4% level quickly. So it's those two that sort of ironically or dichotomous situation, healthy balance sheet, poor growth outlook. I think it's reflected quite a lot in corporate South Africa as well. Very healthy, balance sheets in corporate South Africa, but the outlook not so good. And the other big mega theme that underpinned the infrastructure theme was this shift from consumptive expenditure, which has been the theme for many years since the 90s. We've had a large increase in welfare and social development type spending, to a need to shift that towards investment spending. And that's where the infrastructure theme comes in. And the minister was able to really build on the State of the Nation by providing some meat to the 845 billion that will be spent on infrastructure projects over the coming 3-year period. And also, unveiling a list of 43 projects, a pipeline of over 3 trillion rand of projects that will be delivered hopefully over the next 20 years. And there's some very big ticket items in there. So he was able to really build on it, and I think was also able to answer some of the issues about how these projects would come about and would be funded. And on the funding side, I think there has been this misconception that everything must come out of the budget. Actually, what is clear from from many years now, but I think he really tried to underline the point, because you've got opposition parties continually harping on this, where's the money coming from? It comes from a number of budget and non-budget sources. So the balance sheets of the state-owned enterprises are key and critical to the delivery of these projects, not just the 1 trillion rand budget that he will announce that will grow every year. We now breached that level and will continue to remain above that level for some time unless there's a catastrophic event. And so there's the budget element to it, but there's the non-budget element to it. And I think there was also some happiness that he mentioned the private sector's role, not just as investors generally in the economy, but also in the infrastructure spending place, because there's been a lot of fuzziness and uncertainty about the role for the private sector. Not that it closes that gap. There's still a lot of holes in the policy and how the private sector is going to play a role. But at least, nodding to the issue and saying, the private sector has a role directly, not just as a supplier and a contractor within the infrastructure program, but also as a funder and an investor into the program.
There was an acknowledgement that more needs to be done regarding the actual implementation of state capital budgets. Can you give us deeper insight?
Well, I think there was an element of introspection, an element of looking in the mirror and saying, look, we acknowledge we are weak in this space. We announce capital projects every year. We announce the 800 billion plus every year. and yet we've got a construction economy in recession. So there's a gap, there's a credibility gap, and I think what Pravin Gordhan tried to do yesterday or this week was to try and close that gap by saying, look, we acknowledge this is a big weakness. When we announced these projects, 200 billion last year, only 160 something billion gets actually spent from the line departments or the infrastructure delivery departments, as well as by the state-owned enterprises. There's been slippage on schedule, there's been slippage on budget. And there was a sort of a element of acknowledging that. And what was also good was there were practical actions announced, along with weakness, acknowledging the weakness, to improve the planning, as well as the project management, as well as the procurement capacity in government. So it wasn't just a hollow, yes, we acknowledge that we are problematic, but there were some serious action plans, especially around the whole issue of procurement and tightening that up. The role that a procurement officer will play now within the National Treasury, overseeing all this procurement, and trying to build the procurement officers not as just as individuals that are not corrupt and not doing things in a bad way, but procurement officers that are professional, that have an ability to weigh up the pricing that is on offer. So they want visibility on pricing. They want a sort of centralized pricing database so that when we buy computers, we don't spend 15,000 Rand when they should be costing 5,000 Rand. So there's a whole management element that's coming in. And I think that harks back to the days of Pravin Gordhan at the South African Revenue Services, where it was about incremental management changes that made SARS into the most effective, well, some say the most effective revenue service in the world. And they've really, just by tweaking their management systems. So it's a much bigger challenge, and there's the corruption element. But the fact that it was backed by specific action plans at the national government, the Treasury, the top level, having the chief procurement officer coming into play, all the way down to the provincial and the municipal level, where there's going to be specific actions to build the capacity of procurement officers, to make sure that procurement officers know what is credible pricing, as well as to crack down, hopefully, on this whole corruption scourge.
Besides infrastructure, details were also provided regarding efforts to improve the competitiveness of the productive sectors. Can you tell us more?
Yes, this is, I think, also part of this macro theme of shifting away from purely consumptive-based and wage-based increases in the budget and welfare-based, and we're still doing all that. But I think this shift towards investment is seen, it's fairly modest in the 9.5 billion that's been allocated over the next 3 years to sort of competitiveness and to boosting the productive sectors of mining, but particularly manufacturing and agriculture. So there was of that 9.5, most of it goes to the DTI, most of it goes to sort of boosting, 5.8 billion of which goes to incentives to boost the competitiveness of manufacturers, many of which are still in distress post the 2009 recession, and another 2 billion plus towards these industrial development zones or these special economic zones. Now, I think that was an interesting discussion, around these industrial development zones, the special economic zones. We know the documentation's out for public comment, and there's going to be changes to the policy as well as the legislation around these zones. But what the Minister also indicated is that we're almost going for export processing zones light here, where there's going to be possibly even additional tax relief, even additional relief from some of the regulatory system or the red tape in these zones. That these are things that we've sort of shied away from in the past, but I think there's a need to do things differently, and there's an acknowledgement that we have to do a number of things to get this growth of the productive sector back on track. It's not just knocking the nationalisation debate on its head and putting that to bed, but we actually need to do some practical things around the incentive programs, around the way we tax the productive sectors, whether it's mining, whether it's manufacturers, or whether it is a farming community. So there's a lot of effort, I think, going into that. As I say, the money itself, 9.5 is not massive, but I think the signal is strong that we are trying to have the infrastructure in place to support the productive investment that needs to take place in this economy, and then also have some very practical programs to support the re-establishment, the reindustrialization of this economy, which is really, the industrial base has really been decimated. The agricultural base is nowhere where it should be. I mean, we should be really, this is a world where we're entering where food prices are going to be higher for longer, and we really need to align ourselves to that. And, the uncertainties around land and the whole issues around whether the farming community not really being a happy community. I think there's a view that we need to start changing that and really starting to boost our agricultural production and feed into this rising food price, this other commodity boom that's taking place on the soft commodities. And then mining is still the key game in town, and trying to re-establish some traction and some investment around the mining industry, which we've really lost momentum in those areas. So all in all, I think the productive sectors, on the fringes there's worries about certain taxes and things like that, but should be fairly satisfied with what they saw coming out. The main theme of the shift away from consumption to investment, the fact that there is money now being directed to infrastructure, and it's being done in a fairly fiscally, responsible way. So it's not just a one-hit wonder type thing. And then real programs and projects to try and revive manufacturing, mining, and agriculture.
Terence, thank you very much. That is the Second Take show for this week. Thank you for watching, and join us again next time for more news analysis.